Chapter 4, Part 2. In their 1997 landmark study on dementia and social death, the psychologists Mary Gilhooly and Helen Sweeting observed that the determining factors for social death often coalesce in people with dementia. Advanced age, lengthy fatal illness, and loss of personhood commonly linked to the ability to recognize others. 1/3 of the family caregivers they interviewed not only expressed the belief that the continued existence of their relatives with dementia was pointless, but also treated those relatives as if they were socially dead. The woman who kept her husband on the back patio in the cold of winter, the man who strapped his wife to the toilet while he left the house to run errands, those caregivers regarded their loved ones as, in some significant sense, already gone. These extreme cases highlight the threat of depersonalization for people living with dementia. Older persons with dementia are at greater risk of mistreatment than those of the general elderly population. The National Council on Aging reports that nearly half of elders with dementia have suffered some form of abuse. The notion that persons are already gone surely contributes to such high levels of abuse and neglect. The subtler, more common intimations of social death, the many small ways in which we steer clear of people with dementia underscore the same stigma. I recall visiting a church that had asked me to speak about ministry to people with dementia. The leader of the congregation's pastoral visitation group told me that while my material would be helpful for the visitors, she would never assign them to visit someone with severe dementia. A pastor friend confessed to me that he does not visit a longtime member of his congregation because the member's son tells him not to bother, saying his mother wouldn't remember anyway. Within the walls of CCRC, where I worked, I witnessed a pecking order emerge in which residents with severe dementia fell to the bottom of the heap. Residents who volunteered to visit their frailer neighbors in the gardens often specifically asked me not to assign them to the dementia floor. These peer visitors wished to spend time with people who were with it enough to appreciate the visit. I came to understand that appreciate usually meant recall the visit later. In all the above cases, the visitors in question are those who suffer their time. In all of the above cases, the visitors in question are those who offer their time and energy to the work of compassion, whose ethic compels them to care for vulnerable others. Even among them, a prejudice cuts deeply against persons with dementia, and it's not just them. I have noticed how my own reluctance has surfaced at times, and how my feelings I have noticed how my own reluctance has surfaced at times, and how my own feet have dragged. If the fear of going insane lies beneath the fear of dementia, if part of dementia's stigma stems from the shame surrounding madness, then we would expect madness to still find its way into dementia's descriptors. Given madness's close association with dementia's etymology, history, and special threats, we might expect the images swirling around dementia to gravitate still in 21st century America toward lunacy, if they gravitate toward anything. Seldom, however, do I hear people with dementia referred to as insane or crazy these days, or strangely enough, even as demented. Perhaps we have overcome this particular misconception. Now it seems we know at least a little better, or more truthfully, we know a little more. Brain scans, lab tests, mental exams, genetic testing, and medical histories help physicians determine diagnoses. But if I had lived in the turn of the century, and if my wife hid objects around the house and screamed loudly about someone wanting to kill her, I would have suspected she had gone mad too. I would have grown frightened and admitted her to the nearest Ehrenschloss. Now we have mostly disassociated mental illnesses and dementias from insanity, mercifully abandoning the moralistic categories and remedies of bygone eras. We discriminate among different forms and sources of psychological distress. We better grasp the physiology and distinctive features of different illnesses. We know not all persons with cognitive abnormalities require the same sorts of treatments and services. We know that people can have both dementia and mental illness, but the conditions are not synonymous. People can have dementia with or without psychoses. We have moved away from labeling people, whatever their mental state, as crazy, insane, or mad. Equipped with newer and better information, we fancy ourselves free from pre-modern prejudices against people with damaged brains. We know they are not mad, they are diseased. If we believe Susan Sontag's claim that as scientific knowledge about a disease increases, fear-driven images and moral judgments about its sufferers dissipate, then we should rightly expect metaphors around brain disease to die too. Might madness and its attending metaphors, with all their moral and spiritual baggage, be casualties of enlightenment? And if so, should we expect that prejudice against people with dementia is going to steadily die? Perhaps, but the shedding of prejudice rarely comes so simply and reasonably. The dearth of madness speak might signal progress, or at least would not seem so conspicuous if we took a similarly wary stance toward other dementia metaphors. I suspect, however, that our fear has not so much abated as it has attached itself to a different set of images, in particular, the images of absence. Allusions to the progressive non-existence of people who have dementia seem to crop up in nearly every corner of dementia discourse. A 2010 Time magazine cover brandished the word Alzheimer's in large, bold letters across a woman's half-faded head. From crown to neck, she is only half present. A 2008 Alzheimer's Association advertisement showed a washed-out, phantasmic older man in a tuxedo holding the arm of his daughter in a wedding dress. Another ad in this series showed a similarly ghost-like woman at the dinner table with her granddaughter, who is holding a newborn. When a prominent journalist interviewed the University of North Carolina's legendary men's basketball coach, Dean Smith, in 2014, the year before Smith's dementia-related death, he described Smith as a ghost enclosed with empty stares. Another reporter described him as alive but absent. My friend's words about my own grandfather often revisit me. Oh, so he's gone. Rather than one condition among others, dementia takes on apocalyptic overtones of annihilation. Brain disease evokes the removal of the person in ways other progressive illnesses do not. Images of half-gone or faded persons do not typically accompany, say, heart or liver disease. A person dying of lung cancer is not a ghost in clothes. Dementia, these depictions suggest, never adds to or leaves equal. It only subtracts from the person as a person. The rhetoric of vacancy in our century triumphs over lunacy. It seems we favor the mind in absentia as opposed to in dementia. The person is not crazy, she is simply gone. Favoring the dissolution of persons over their disordering may seem on the surface a more humane gesture. Mom is fading sounds less ugly than Mom is batty. To be sure, There are good reasons to divorce dementia and other brain-altering conditions from madness, but I fear the move to vacancy rather than mitigating dementia's stigma may actually intensify it. For starters, oblivion metaphors seem not to square with actual experience. I know what the actual brain dead look like, although I wish I did not know. I have seen vacancy. The worst job I ever had was the on-call chaplain for an organ donation network. I carried around paper night and day dreading the call. In order to be eligible to donate one's vital organs, the donor candidate typically dies from traumatic head injury and is pronounced brain dead. In one case I worked involved a man who fell off his bicycle and hit his head. Another case I recall was a man who tried to hang himself, whose girlfriend found him suspended from a cord in his garage. Both men had no blood flow to their brains. Their pupils were fixed and dilated. All reflexes were gone, even the breath reflex. These patients looked as flaccid as corpses, except for the modern peculiarity that their lungs continued to rise and fall, and their hearts continued to pump, wholly by machine assistance, until the moment right before the removal of the organs. I found the job unbearably gruesome and sad. After working a few cases, I tendered my resignation. I knew there was hope on the other end for the organ recipients, even hope down the line for the devastated families I encountered. My orientation to the job had been replete with heart-melting testimonies of generosity and gratitude. However, I was not on that other end. I was on the fixed pupils end, the weeping end, the found my lover swinging from the rafters end. Brain death, in my experience, does not resemble dementia, even advanced dementia. A palpable life force abides in persons with dementia. Sometimes a discomforting life, but a life to encounter, engage, and know nonetheless. They make motion and express emotions. They act and attempt to act. Personal expressions endure, however subtly. Their highly symbolic language requires sensitive interpreters and compels creative response. And at their dying breath, I have witnessed their entire bodies release and cease, come into an organic rest. They were never still breathing casualties like the brain dead. I have never encountered a person with advanced dementia as appearing even virtually brain dead. They must be reckoned with as individuals with distinct ways of being in the world. In fact, of the two, lunacy, more than vacancy, would better describe certain encounters I had with people on the dementia unit in the gardens. I recall Pearl, who could shake the building with her screams, and Lena, who sang songs from her days in the Hitler Youth, claiming the facility piped these jingles into her apartment. Barbara would slam her walker against the dining room wall, and when she saw me in her rage, she implored, "Pray our Father for me." Frida, a retired kindergarten teacher, saw school children in her room in the middle of the night and taught them their classroom lessons. Joe, at the top of his lungs when no music was playing. It is hard to construe any of these residents as gone. Rather, they appeared more disordered than empty. Their expressions ring more of mental disturbance than mental absence, and speak to an abiding self, albeit distressed self at times, rather than to an absent self. This virtually brain-dead ideology, this absenting of persons with dementia, relieves caregivers of both anxiety and responsibility, says Kitwood. It all allows the psychological barriers to remain high, even in care settings marked by greater flexibility and lower psychological defenses, Kitwood notes, the anxieties surrounding dementia are very great, and the unconscious is highly ingenious in creating new forms of avoidance. More than a third of people living with dementia report losing friends after they received a dementia diagnosis. According to a 2013 report by the UK's Alzheimer's Society, this fact seems to point to anxieties around dementia, which result in avoidance of persons with a diagnosis, while descriptions of dementia patients as brain dead represents the far extreme of vacancy metaphors. Any intimation that a person is gone alleviates culpability. I have little responsibility for the well-being of someone who is actually no one. When one's mind has vanished rather than warped, if it is gone, then our guilt can recede. We are relieved of the pressure of having to relate to a person with a mind still there, but deformed. While there is a troubling moralism attached to lunacy, there is an equally troubling nihilism attached to vacancy. The former cloaks dementia and its sufferers in spiritual judgments. The latter purges dementia and its sufferers of meaning or of any potential for meaningful existence. Attempting to neutralize our fears of going insane, we vacate the mind from the body. The light's on, but nobody's home. It seems we have simply replaced the superstitious filling of the person with demons, with a superstitious emptying of the person of intention and meaning. She is not aware. He does not know. His stares are empty. She does not recognize, just a ghost in clothes. How are these claims anything but metaphysical? To be sure, certain cognitive capabilities, language and motor skills, types of recall and spatial processing diminish with dementia. But when we pronounce another human absent, gone, empty, unaware, we assume that we have a kind of godlike knowledge, awareness that complex constellations of intellectual, emotional, somatic, spiritual knowing is irreducible to my and others' limited perceptions. Subjected to highly circumscribed scrutiny of their cognition, persons with dementia often receive labels that tell only partial truths about their capacities and can feed the myth of absence. The neuropsychologist Stephen Sabat's 2001 book, The Experience of Alzheimer's Disease, Life Through a Tangled Veil, a seminal work among person-centered care advocates, highlights the subjective experience of people living with dementia. Through his interviews with adult daycare participants, Sabat notes the emotional complexity of his subjects' experiences for which mental exams failed to properly account. One interviewee, a retired academic and scientist, had scored poorly on mental exams, and his Alzheimer's disease was termed moderate to severe. By standard metrics, he possessed little or no cognitive ability, yet he eagerly participated in Sabat's research, what the participant called the project, a sort of scientific thing that brought real stature to do. Sabat discovered that the tests used to assess the interviewee's cognitive abilities did not tap his need, nor his ability to maintain feelings of self-worth, which remained intact. A particular assessment tool had pronounced the man gone, but had not accounted for the whole picture of someone who craved recognition as a highly educated person, who longed to contribute to a worthy project. I called Vera, a resident on the dementia unit, whom the floor staff had told me did not speak or interact with others. She was disengaged from her social environment, they said, due to her severe cognitive impairments. In what turned out to be her final months, Vera attended the unit's weekly interfaith spirituality group. the small gathering that Vera's late evangelical neighbor Betty had helped form. Far from disengaged, Vera